Hello everyone, welcome to ePathshala. I am Dr. Soma Sarkar. Today's module is on land and soil resources, part B, distribution, land use and scarcity concern. This belongs to the paper Resource Geography. Through this lecture, you should be able to understand the status and trend of global land use land cover system with reference to the developing and developed countries, to explore the major emerging issues influencing land use change, and to examine the implications of recent changes for achieving international accords. In order to understand the global trend of land use land cover system, we must understand all other resource stresses and its resulting factors. So, what is resource stress? Why it is a matter of concern to us? Resource stress refers to the pressure that a resource faces towards its existence on the earth. Our consciousness towards resource stress and the need for resource management emerged when we stood in front of a question on whether economic growth and human development can be sustained in our finite natural world. We are well aware that population growth, changing climate patterns, economic globalization, rapid urbanization and increasing use of natural resources are putting pressure on our ecosystems as never before. So, how land resource is under stress? Competing demands for food, feed, fuel and raw material are intensifying pressure on land. Threat on soil health actually leads to land degradation. Understanding the severity of the situation, the 68th UN General Assembly declared 2015 as the International Year of Soils, where it stated that soils constitute the foundation for agricultural development, essential ecosystem functions and food security, and hence are key for sustaining life on earth. Similarly, according to developmental report by World Bank, the demand for food is projected to rise by 50% by 2030. Statistics shows that between 2000 and 2008, the global consumed more food than it produced in 7 of the 8 years. Of course, one of the probable reasons for such anomaly was reported due to long period of underinvestment in agriculture and the current rates of productivity growth driven by your green revolution are not satisfactory. Besides this, the amount of arable land per capita almost halved from 1960 to 2007, from about 0.4 to 0.2 hectares, but its demand is continuously increasing from multiple sources including food, feed, fiber, biofuel, carbon sequestration and cities. The 4th Global Environmental Outlook by UNEP expressed their concern over increased demand for food, waste disposal, feed, which has led to unsustainable patterns of land use and land degradation. It further expressed that continued inaction on land stewardship combined with increased climate change would reduce social resilience and make recovery from future stresses difficult or impossible. So, in this regard, it is important for us to understand soil degradation in much broader sense. So, what does FAO says? How does it explain soil degradation? So, as per FAO, the soil degradation as a change in the soil health status resulting in a diminished capacity of the ecosystem to provide goods and services for its beneficiaries. Degraded soils have a health status such that they do not provide the normal goods and services of the particular soil in its ecosystem. So, in a nutshell, soil degradation refers to a broad spectrum of changes in soil characteristic because of natural or anthropogenic factors that alter their structure and quality. In this direction, the global assessment of soil degradation has described soil degradation as a human-induced phenomena, and even it pointed out that it could be described as a deterioration of the soil quality, that is the partial or the entire loss of one or more soil functions through physical, say for example erosion, compaction or chemical like acidification, salinizations, and biological processes like loss of soil organic matter, loss of biodiversity. So, question arises, which are the factors that determine the kind of degradation of soil? And they are the soil inherent properties like the physical and the chemical properties, the climate, which includes like precipitation, temperature, humidity, the characteristic of the terrain like slope, drainage capacity of the terrain, and of course the vegetation like what is the biodiversity, biomass. So, land degradation is a broader concept than the soil degradation, as it includes the assessment of the interrelated component of the ecosystem and of the trade-off that may exist between the loss of biodiversity, for example, then matched against the improvements in the economic services under intensive farming. Estimated provided by FAO under UNDP project land degradation assessment in dry lands suggests that global land status can be characterized as high degradation or highly degraded lands that covers about 25%. Moderate degradation trend is slightly or moderate degraded lands as 36%. Moderate degradation in slightly or moderately degraded land as 8% and improving land 8% again. Then bare areas which are not under any use, that includes about 18% and the remaining 2% is represented by the water. So, what does it shows? How land degradation is a big concern in terms of the sustainable development of our own growth. So, let us move to the status, problem and the trends of global land system. In this regard, let us first start with agriculture. Owing to population growth, urbanization and change in diet, by change in diet, I am actually meaning the inclusion of more animal product in food habit. So, and including this change in diet, there can be demands for food and livestock feed are rising rapidly, because when you are actually changing your diet, so that will directly impact the livestock population. All these are leading to widespread expansion of agricultural land allotted to livestock, both directly and indirectly through agricultural lands being dedicated to your animal feed production. Beside this, at a time when we are struggling with threat of food security due to water shortage or land degradation, our accelerated interest and policy encouragement towards biofuel, feeds and fiber production in the recent year imposes extra burden on agricultural land use. The scenario is similar in both the developing and developed nations. For example, in 2009, there were approximately 3.3 billion hectares of pasture and about 1.5 billion hectares of cropland globally. All regions except Europe had greater proportion of land area devoted to pasture than cropland. and it has been argued that land degradation affects all types of land cover. Larger gaps between actual and the potential yield are also a point of concern and are mainly found where low input agriculture is practiced. Countries like Africa, Latin American nations and the Caribbean, where although crop areas have expanded since 2001, they still have relatively low yield compared to North America and Europe. If such region specific constraints can be assessed and overcome, increase in food production is possible while minimizing the cropland expansion. However, one must remember that crop productivity is limited, of course, by the biophysical and other factor. Moreover, excessive use of machinery and the chemical supplement in the form of fertilizers, herbicides and pesticides, however, break up soil structure, increases erosion, chemically pollutes soil, contaminates ground and surface water, changes greenhouse gas fluxes and destroy habitat. Similarly, with widespread adaptation of intensive mechanized high input agricultural practices, the rate of soil erosion has greatly increased. Erosion in conventional agricultural system is now as high as 3 times as in systems practicing conservational agriculture and nearly over 75% times higher than in the systems with natural vegetation. If we say this scenario in the global situation, then globally soil erosion contributing to the decline in the cropland available per person as a degraded land is being abandoned. Thus, the yield gains achieved by these methods come with ecological cost. We have to understand this. Current intensive farming practices greatly deplete soil organic matter and your soil carbon stocks. The decrease in soil organic matter reduces the resistance of soils to the erosional agents like erosion by mean of wind, by mean of water. Lowers the soil water holding capacity of the soil and as a result affects the overall soil health. Therefore, a main goal for sustainable agricultural practice is to preserve soil health, enhancing soil content and limiting the soil erosion to a minimum level. Now, let us move to the second land use system, that is forest. Historically, forests have been under pressure due to increasing demands for shelter, agricultural land, meat production and fuel and timber extraction. But in recent decades, this pressure has increased due to competing demands for agricultural expansion and biofuel production related to rapid urbanization and infrastructural development and increased global demand for forest product. However, the key drivers of forest losses are population growth, poverty, economic growth, land pricing, international demands for timber and other forest products, insecurities of the right of local people and incomplete valuation of forest ecosystem. In this regard, the highest rate of tropical forest loss over this period occurred in South America and Africa. Some rapidly developing countries that suffered extensive deforestation in 1990s, since 1990s includes mainly Brazil and Indonesia, while less developed nations in Latin America and Africa continue to experience high rate of forest loss. Although much of the developed world has experienced forest loss, mainly due to the natural factors such as drought, forest fire and insect attack that had excavated the forest loss in the recent decades. So, well, in this, all this brings us to the another land use system, that is the urban area and the human infrastructure. As we all know that urbanization has progressed at an extraordinary rate in the recent decades, and this growth is projected to continue throughout the century. Urban areas are the hubs of social processes and thus driving many changes through material demand that affects land use and land cover, biodiversity, water resources both locally and globally. It is the population concentration, density of the population, economic activity and wealth generation in the urban area which drives their impact on the global environment with demands for food, energy, water and production of materials that have significant consequences for land use change around the world. The UN Population Divisions projects that between 2007 and 2050, the world's urban population may rise by more than 3 billion, with almost all future population growth expected to take place in the cities and the towns of the developing countries. This increase is expected to occur primarily in the sprawled pattern and to have major effect on the greenhouse gas emission, of course, air pollution and the waste management. Understanding the present land concerns, we must check the land related international agreed goals. In most of the international agreed goals like Johannesburg Plan of Implementation, WSSD 2002, Millennium Development Goals, UN 2000, World Food Summit Plan of Action, that is FAO 1996, United Nations Conventions to Combat Desertification, UNCCD 1994 and so on, the food security, poverty reduction and environmental sustainability were the main theme related to the land. Since these agreements were prepared after rigorous discussion and consensus by experts, we have to understand that failure to achieve these targets could have severe impact on environmental integrity and human well-being. So, where do we stand? However, these are often overshadowed by other pressures and competing demands. So, let us now identify the major issues that are actually obstructing these goals. The first to be mentioned is the economic growth at the expense of natural capital. Distorted incentives have reduced natural capital while often rendering attempts to curtail resources or energy use are found politically problematic. Allowing the privatizations of profit from the extraction of natural capital, natural resources at the expense of more innovative and equitable land management approaches is a pervasive problem across all the land cover and land uses. Secondly, competing demands for land, like the challenges of feeding a growing human population has been compounded by rising affluence in some regions, changing diets and increasing demands for biofuel and other industrial material such as timber. Protected lands have been intensified competition for land and pressures on terrestrial ecosystems. Thirdly, the increased separation of production from consumption. So, we are talking about how the increased separation of production from consumption can be cited. We have to understand that urbanization and globalization contribute to the separation between the places where the resources and goods originate and where the products are actually being consumed. Recent research suggests that the spatial distance between the production and consumption is both significant. As a result, many of the ecological costs of consumption are borne by people and places increasingly far from the consumption site. This challenge for the global economy is to encourage the best of what it can be offered in terms of efficient resource use while taking measures to reduce the occurrence, concentrance and transfer of environmental and the social cost. Last but not the least, the governance challenges related to the sustainable land management. What are the challenges? There are three components of governance system. If we take, that is, one is actors and organizations, institutions and practices. Now, incompatibility between this is one of the most common reason for the lack of successful transition from resource extraction to the sustainable management of land resources. A major challenge is to find the best governance systems, which depends on the existing governance alongside the social, economic and the environmental conditions and their dynamics. Finally, we can give a broad outlook, we can have an outlook towards this goals gap and try to find the solutions. By now, we have understood that complex forces are actually affecting land resources, where some are at dramatic rate of changes with diverse regional and national characteristics, continued deforestation, wetland conversion, dry land degradation, global population growth and rising consumption exert ever greater pressure on land. While these and other processes are unfolding rapidly, their long-term implications remain uncertain. Early evidences of their social and environmental consequences should be closely considered. In combination, these processes are seriously affecting the environment in several regions and therefore require urgent attention. One key to avoiding environmental damage is to effectively monitor environmental trends. Satellite remote sensing is an essential tool for monitoring global land use resources, and no such, however, technology has existed to study the population pattern. Now, national census efforts, the best current techniques, are sporadic and underfunded in many countries, and there is a significant data gap for population change in the rural areas. So, further it is critical to track the consequences of the environment of rapid and extensive urbanizations with its uncertain implications for land resources. Goals cannot be considered in isolation. Due to tensions and synergies, progress towards one goal must be viewed in light of the implications for the other. For example, if food production is increased through agricultural expansion, It directly compromises the protection of forest, wetlands and other ecosystem. Over the past 2 decades, payment of ecosystem services has gained attention as a mechanism with the potential to account for services provided by the ecosystem in the market transactions. This build breaches and balances interest between the users and providers of these services and deals with the linked challenges of conservation and poverty alleviation. Taking into account the social norms and culture, building trust between actors and dealing with power relations will ultimately define benefit allocation strategies and successful long-term implications of these PEAs. Limitation in assessment of land use change processes cannot and should not delay action to address their driving forces, with the precautionary principle being applied to reduce their negative impacts. While many organizations, whether national or international, are working in this effort, every level of government has a crucial role, responsibility and opportunity to work for the change. In conclusion, it can be put forward that when population growth, urbanization and change in diets, demands for food and livestock feed are imposing pressure on the land and emerging issues influencing land use change, there is an urgent need at all levels to raise awareness on soil health and to promote sustainable use of our limited land resources using the best available scientific information and building on all dimensions of sustainable development. However, understanding the implications of recent changes for achieving international accords, issues of capacity building